On the 4th of July 1871, a Royal Navy ship sailed up the Straits of Malacca and anchored at the mouth of the Selangor River on the west coast of the Malay Peninsula. With guns blazing, it sought to teach a lesson to a fortress town already fractured by civil war. What followed was not merely a punitive action. It was a textbook demonstration of that most persuasive of British inventions, gunboat diplomacy. What began as a simple case of piracy soon became a turning point in the British colonisation of the Malay Peninsula. In this video, we shall sail with the HMS Rinaldo and her consort, the Pluto, into the muddy waters of Selangor's past, for a tale of broken treaties, brazen piracy, and imperial violence. By the middle of the 19th century, much of the Malay Peninsula was in a state of anarchy, none more so than the Sultanate of Selangor. British colonial officer Frank Swettenham would later remark that the normal state of Selangor was robbery, battle, and murder. Rival Malay factions fought for territorial supremacy, while Chinese secret societies allied with them clashed over rich tin mining fields. The result was chaos on land and piracy at sea. At the center of this disorder was Sultan Abdul Samad of Selangor, an aging ruler who had retired to his palace in Langat and left the reins of government to his son-in-law and viceroy, Tengku Kudin, an energetic Kedah prince, schooled in European notions of order and development. Opposing him was the redoubtable Raja Mahdi, a fierce warrior who had seized Klang in 1867. But in 1870, Tengku Kudin's forces captured Raja Mahdi's fort there after a brutal 8-month-long siege. Mahdi retreated to Kuala Selangor at the mouth of the Selangor River, where he would dig in and make his stand. Our tale begins on the 14th of June 1871, when a Chinese junk, the Kim Seng Chong, departed Penang for Larut, carrying a cargo of silks, dry goods, and curiosities, along with a complement of passengers. 8 days later, the vessel was still missing. It would later emerge that among the passengers was a group of Chinese pirates who had seized the vessel at sea, murdering 34 souls on board, men, women, and children. News of the atrocity reached Singapore, and the British sprang into action. The government steamer Pluto, carrying a police detachment, was dispatched to locate the missing vessel. On June 28th, the Pluto found the junk at anchor in the Selangor estuary. The ship's name had been scraped off her hull, but her gong, drum, and cymbals still bore it. Blood stained the deck. The cargo was already turning up in the shops of Kuala Selangor. Inspector Cox led a police landing party ashore and attempted to seize the stolen goods and arrest several Chinese suspects. This sparked a confrontation. A hostile crowd assembled, led by none other than Raja Mahmud, the Tengku Panglima Besar of Selangor and one of the most formidable warriors of his age, now a close lieutenant of Raja Mahdi. As tensions escalated, the British were fired upon. Cox and his men barely managed to retreat to the Pluto, along with several Chinese suspects and a portion of the stolen goods. The Pluto sailed away, towing the junk behind her. To British eyes, this was not only a case of piracy, it was a breach of the 1825 treaty with the Sultan of Selangor, which bound him to prevent piracy and surrender any perpetrators found within his realm. That the pirates appeared to be under the protection of the local Malay rulers made the matter intolerable. A demonstration of force was deemed necessary. On July 3rd, the Pluto returned, but this time accompanied by HMS Rinaldo, a chameleon-class cruise sloop bristling with firepower, 5 40-pounder breech-loading guns and 12 32-pounder muzzle-loading smoothbores. The Pluto also brought boats in tow filled with Marines and the fabled blue jackets of the Navy. But Kuala Selangor was not going to be an easy target for the British. The Malays were in a strongly fortified position that was bristling with guns. A 17-gun earthwork fort stood atop a steep hill, Bukit Malawati. It was encircled by stone walls and timber palisades. A second fort of 9 guns occupied a low hill below it at Tanjung Kramat. This fort commanded the entrance to the river mouth. A third earthwork battery, closer to the water, bore 7 32-pounder guns. Even the timber houses in the town across the river were stockaded and armed with hidden guns. Lieutenant Eustace Maud led a detachment from the Rinaldo upriver and made a landing on the northern bank, where they encountered a party of Malays under Raja Mahmud. After a tense exchange, musket fire erupted from a nearby house, and hand-to-hand combat followed. Maud was wounded by a kris. 7 of his men were injured, 1 mortally. The British withdrew under cover of Pluto's field gun. At about the same time, Raja Mahdi's men opened fire from the fort down upon 2 marine parties that were landing on the south bank, killing 1 and wounding 5. Under heavy fire, the Marines too had to retreat. The Pluto withdrew to Penang with her dead and wounded, but Rinaldo remained, her vengeance yet to come. At dawn on July 4th, Rinaldo steamed up the river, drawing fire from every fort, stockade and house along the river banks. Undaunted, Rinaldo fired broadsides to port and starboard as she pressed upriver, her gunners clearing both decks in disciplined succession. She dropped anchor when she was abreast of the town, continuing her intense bombardment of the forts and the town. By 4 o'clock, the Malay guns were silent, the town ablaze, and the forts abandoned. Rinaldo withdrew downstream, but her work was still not finished. 2 days later, on the 6th of July, Rinaldo returned. Under the watchful gaze of her guns, a landing party went ashore. The forts were deserted. Only the charred remnants of earthworks and splintered frames of timber stockades remained. Raja Mahdi and his men had melted into the surrounding jungle. The British razed what was left. The guns were spiked, the magazines destroyed, and Kuala Selangor was handed over to Tengku Kudin. But the British were not quite done yet. Upon hearing of the Rinaldo's success, Acting Governor Anson dispatched the Colonial Secretary, the soon-to-be infamous Mr. James J.W.W. Birch, to meet with the Sultan of Selangor at his residence in Kuala Langat. Birch did not travel alone. He arrived aboard the Pluto accompanied by HMS Teaser, a Beacon-class gunboat armed with a 7-inch rifle muzzleloader gun a 64-pounder and two 20-pounder breech loaders. Birch also landed with a large detachment of Marines, while the teaser's guns were trained upon the royal palace. The Sultan, now keen to dissociate himself from the Mahdi's rebels, declared them to be bad men and pirates. Birch demanded that the Sultan arrest the remaining pirates and guarantee that no such men would again be permitted to take refuge or hold forts in Selangor. Birch also proposed reconfirming Tengku Kudin as viceroy over the river district, a figure more agreeable to British interests. When the Sultan replied that he must first consult his chiefs, Birch threatened force within 24 hours. Faced with gunboats and marines, the Sultan had no choice but to relent. This episode marked a decisive turning point. Though non-intervention remained the official policy of the British government, it had become, in practice, a polite fiction. The Malay Peninsula was no longer a patchwork of independent courts and trading ports. It had become a chessboard of princes, treaties, and gunboats, where British interests dictated the moves. And it's no accident that two names from this story, Pluto and Birch, would soon resurface in the affairs of that other tin-rich Malay state, Perak. But that, my dear viewer, is a story for another video. Thus did the once formidable stronghold fall, not with a heroic last stand, but with a hail of fire and a quiet retreat into the jungle, leaving the Union Jack to flutter triumphantly not only over its ashes, but in time, over much of the Malay Peninsula. If this tale of princes, pirates and warriors struck the right chord with you, do give it a like, share your thoughts below, or subscribe for more colonial intrigues and historical misadventures. Until then, cheerio!